Oh, no.
Oh, dude.
That was true. The time has finally come. I am super excited to put the 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro against some serious competition. The Razer Blade 15 Advanced with an i9 8-core processor, the RTX 3080 with 16 gigabytes of video memory, 32 gigs of RAM, and both having a 1 terabyte SSD with a price difference of only $100. And this is the Razer with a 4K OLED display. And we will see not only how they compare in terms of the design, the speakers, webcams, these displays, but also performance in different benchmarks and real world tests such as photo editing, video editing, Blender 3D, and more. We're also gonna see something that most people don't do, and that is unplugged performance for the times where you're using this actually as a laptop and you can't plug into wall power. Let's start out with the external differences. The Razer is a 15-inch machine compared to a 16-inch MacBook Pro. So as you guys could see, the footprint is a little bit larger on the 16-inch, but not by that much, surprisingly. And even though the Razer looks thicker on the desk, that's because of its thicker feet. So in reality, thickness is about the same. And the Razer needs those feet because its intake fans are on the bottom with these cutouts and then exhaust at the top, instead of having the vents on the side so they don't get blocked by blankets if it's on your lap, and the exhausts that go up the screen. As far as ports, the MacBook finally caught up, but the Razer still has an extra USB Type-A port there on the right-hand side. Now the HDMI on the Razer is 2.1, so supports 8K at 60 Hz or 4K at 120, which is really nice. And the SD card is UHS Type 3 instead of UHS Type 2, so it's twice the speed, but of course those cards don't exist yet. Now on the left side, both have charging ports. Apple's is MagSafe, which is nice. Both have headphone jacks. Apple's offers high impedance support for those crazy headphones. We have Thunderbolt 4 on both, but the MacBook has 2 of those ports with full bandwidth, and the Razer gives us 2 more USB-A ports. Also keep in mind that with the Razer, you have to use this dedicated charging adapter if you want to get the proper performance, whereas the MacBook, even if you choose to use USB Type-C, you'll get full charging other than the fast charge to 50%. Opening these up, one thing I love about the Razer, it has Windows Hello, so already logged me in. Usually if it's been sitting for a while, it'll dismiss the lock screen automatically. In this case, I just hit the space bar, and on the MacBook, we have Touch ID, which is less convenient. Now, as far as the keyboards and the trackpads, there is no doubt that the MacBook is better in each way. The keyboard feels nicer, and the trackpad is not the diving board design that is uneven. You have that nice force touch that has really great gestures, and it just works super well. Now, before we compare OLED to mini LED, let's compare the speakers. I'm excited now because they have been updated here. We have this THX spatial logo compared to these Apple speakers, which are known to be good. So let's go ahead and take a listen. Alright guys, well that started off pretty decent and then it got horrible. Now the Razer used to have super quiet speakers. It was insanely embarrassing. They made these a lot louder, but there is no bass. It's almost like the woofers got disconnected, and then when the bass drop hit, the whole volume went down. So at first, it was actually louder than the MacBook, which was impressive, both no bass, but then it just dropped. So I don't really know how THX is putting their logo on this, because even though it's loud, it is not sound good and it's not consistent. As far as webcam quality, Apple finally updated to 1080p cameras with better lenses, and they still have the same studio quality mics as they call them. An advanced version of the Razer Blade also comes with a 1080p camera. So you guys let me know which one looks better in the good lighting scenario. Now, since most people don't use studio lights like YouTubers, here is the MacBook in a lower light situation, just like most people's homes in the evenings. And here's the Razer in a lower light scenario like most people have at their homes. So let me know which one looked better and which one sounded better down in the comments section below. And now let's get into the displays, and we have a ton ton of differences. First off, yes, we have a notch on the MacBook. It does stand out, not so much in this background, but definitely pops. Apple did give us a little bit of extra space for the menu bar when they added that notch. They didn't take it away. Now on the Razer, we have that huge chin down below, almost like a mini iMac with that design. Now the aspect ratios are different. We have 16:10 plus the extra space compared to 16:9. So this is a much wider, smaller display. And then as far as resolutions, the Razer is a little bit higher. We have a pure 4K display compared to an almost 4K display with the MacBook. Now the Mac also has a ProMotion 120 Hz display for that super smooth animations and if you want to play games at higher frequencies. And it can also drop all the way down to 24 Hz to save you battery life if you're watching movies, or you can select custom resolutions if you're doing video production. Both of these support DCI P3 colors, which is great for those that work with colors in photo or video, but the Razer is only an 8-bit display, not a 10-bit, and with that, with these OLED displays, you have to be extremely careful because if you change brightness, the colors do shift, so you need to calibrate them yourselves at the brightness you're gonna use it at and stick to that brightness if you want accurate colors. As far as normal brightness, both are quite good. The MacBook is a little bit brighter though, but the viewing angle difference is dramatic. The OLED display on the Razer, it keeps both its colors and its brightness much better if you are viewing from the side or from the top, whereas the MacBook, you need to be sitting directly in front of it to get proper colors. Now, aside from brightness, we have reflectivity, and Apple has amazing coatings on here, so when you're outside with that brightness, you do not have any issues, or in bright rooms, whereas the Razer has one of the most reflective screens that I've seen. I've reviewed this OLED display in their previous laptops. It has not changed. It is pretty much like a mirror. Now this also matters when you are watching HDR content, but unfortunately, I guess we have to plug in the Razer in order to stream HDR. And now all of a sudden, I don't know why, but everything is super laggy, even though I did go into Razer Synapse and I maxed out all the performance to the boost setting, the highest one. All right guys, so I'm going through all the HDR settings, trying to adjust everything, and no matter what, the windows look weird. I tried Chrome, I tried Edge. The HDR is looking horrific right now. There's those performance issues. I don't really know what the deal is. I mean, look at that. I have not seen this bad. So I don't know what's going on. Everything's blowing out. Of course, the screen isn't any brighter than about 450 nits, so it can't really get that peak. Maybe that's why it's blowing stuff out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and disable that, and then we'll look at the content without all those issues. And wow, okay, now the performance is back. Now we're getting everything running smoothly again. So now playing these back, we're getting HDR on the MacBook. Now this video here on YouTube is limited to about 1000 nits, but this display goes up to 1600 peak compared to about 450. And the crazy thing is that even though the MacBook is not an OLED display, our blacks are looking much deeper because of all the reflectivity on this display with the Razer. Now in darker environments, reflectivity is less of an issue, so that definitely helps the Razer, but the MacBook still looks like it has deeper contrast, maybe because of that layer of touchscreen on the Razer, and obviously the highlights pop a lot more, and we have nicer colors as well. Now where that OLED display stands out is blooming. Because the pixels are actually turned off, even in the craziest high contrast situations like this, you have no blooming, whereas on MacBook, you do see blooming where you have full brightness with those bright light bars, white bars, and then pure darks right next to it. And of course, the Razer is a touchscreen, which is why it might be so reflective. So if you're somebody that likes to be able to use your finger and scroll, that is definitely a benefit for you. And now getting into performance, we are gonna start out by testing the SSDs. Both of these do have the same 1 terabyte. We know that the MacBook has new, faster SSDs, but look at this. In the same AJA disk speed test, the Razer actually beats it by almost 1000 in read and a few hundred in write. Now, of course, Blackmagic disk speed test, it actually runs quite a bit faster, also over 5000 in read, but this is a fair test. And now for a real world test, we have to transfer our folder that has all our test files. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in. The Razer has those fast SSDs, so it shouldn't be an issue because it has super fast SSDs, and this Thunderbolt drive reads at about 2000 or so. It's taking a little bit to ramp up here. That's interesting. Our MacBook finished in 1 minute and 53 seconds for this transfer, and actually the file size was slightly lower showing up on Windows compared to Mac was 204 gigabytes compared to 220, but let's see what happens. All right, finally it is starting to kick up here. It seems to not want to go over about 900 megabytes. It'll write fast and slow down, even though that is a Thunderbolt 4 port and this is a Thunderbolt drive. All right, so that took 5 minutes and 51 seconds compared to 1 minute and 53. I don't know what the deal is there. I looked over here, it's connected as a PCI device, so it is running with NVMe, not USB-C. I read online some people posting and people are saying there's issues maybe not of power going through. I don't really know. Maybe we should just get rid of this test, but I guess we'll just leave it in. And now let's get into the CPU testing. We're gonna start out with Geekbench 5. Both of these have, as you see, we have 32 gigs of RAM and they have 8 high performance cores. Of course, the M1 Pro also has 2 efficiency cores, which makes up for just a tiny bit of difference, but the i9 can scale to much higher frequencies and both are plugged in. What the heck? Vadim, why are we scoring so low? Is this normal?
4,000?
Yeah, 4,000, 917 single core. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, so looks like we're unplugged. Go check the cable down there. It's plugged in here all the way.
Yeah, man, it's like not plugged in fully. There you go. Now it's fully plugged in.
Yep, I see it. Wait, how are we at 30% battery life? We didn't even do any performance tests yet other than this one run of Geekbench and then those other speaker tests and display tests. Our MacBook is at 89%. We started both of these at 100% battery, and we're not doing a battery life test because we know this thing needs to be plugged in for at least the graphics testing. Do you think that's why the SSD was running so slow?
I don't know, man. We could try it.
Yep, it's now breaking that 900 megabyte per second barrier. Still only at 1.1. Oh, throttling a little bit. The fans are running. I don't know if this is full blast. You guys hear that? This is crazy. So as soon as it goes above 900, the fans kick up louder, and then it throttles down a little bit, and then the fans cool down. All right, but we are definitely getting a lot better speeds now. So it looks like, yes, the SSD, external SSD is throttled if you're on battery power, even though we maxed out all the performance settings for Windows, for the Razer. And bam, we are done. That was faster, but the highest I ever saw it hit is 1.4 gigahertz instead of 2 gigahertz, or yeah, 2 gigabytes a second. It took 4 minutes and 19 seconds with it plugged in, with all that fan noise. So this kind of just proves that this is like an all-in-one mini desktop that you can unplug and bring with you and then plug back in. Now we will do a couple more unplugged tests just to see the performance difference, but man, that just proves a point, especially that 30% battery life after just, I don't know, an hour and a half of us shooting compared to oh, this is plugged in now. I think it was 88 or so. All right, we have our scores plugged in, and it looks like single core, the MacBook is 11% faster, and multi-core, it is 35% faster. And taking a look at that first unplugged score we got, the single core is almost twice as fast, and the multi-core is almost 3 times faster. That's crazy. Maybe that's why when I tried testing out HDR, everything got super choppy and laggy. That makes me want to test our web browsing test speedometer 2.0. So let's go ahead and run that. Oh, no. Oh, that was true. Oh no, you said 140, look at this, yeah, 86.97. Thankfully, when it's plugged in, it actually gets really excellent web browsing performance. 203.5 is quite high. The MacBook's still about 34% faster, but that doesn't matter, it's both quick. But when you unplug, no wonder it was running so slow before. This thing is limiting power so much to save battery life that I haven't seen a score this bad in such a long time, and it definitely is slow for web browsing. So even if when you're web browsing, make sure to plug this machine in. Now I don't want to come off seeing like some crazy person dissing on this laptop. Of course it needs the power. It has this 3080 inside. That's what we are excited to test out. So I'm gonna run Geekbench 5's compute test using Metal on the Mac and CUDA for Nvidia on the Razer. Now with that said, this is the most powerful slim laptop that you can get today. Now we are super excited to test out Alder Lake. Those laptops will be coming out hopefully soon, and we will get it as soon as we possibly can. So if you guys want to see some comparisons with the MacBook and the new Alder Lake chips, make sure you guys are subscribed. And with that, you guys can help us reach our goal of 1 million subscribers before the end of the year. We would absolutely appreciate it. All right, guys, finally, we have a great result. Look at that performance with that 3080 with 16 gigabytes of video memory, almost 140,000 compared to 63,747. That is a difference of more than double. Now, we did actually prove in our last video that Geekbench is not giving the full performance of this M1 Max chip. It only uses 36 watts instead of using up to 46. But of course, we will test out some more real world tests. Now, we also ran this on battery power and we were surprised. We got a score of pretty much 82,000. So yes, you do lose quite a bit of performance, but it still is better than the MacBook Pro, and we'll see how that also affects real world use. And now we'll see how the 3080 compares to the M1 Max when we're doing a gaming workload. We have 3D Mark's new Wildlife Extreme. We're gonna run the unlimited mode. It's gonna be off screen, so no difference in resolutions. And I wanna see how much power both of these GPUs suck. All right, guys, the score is in, and this is crazy. So as far as the frame rate, our MacBook has 121.4 FPS. Of course, that was off screen, or else it'd be limited 120 with ProMotion. And the Razer with the 3080 got 129.12. That's only a difference of 6% between frame rate. That is insane. And that is because this test is optimized for metal, just like games. For example, World of Warcraft is now optimized. It will get basically the same frame rate between a 3080 plugged in and the M1 Max with the 32 core graphics. Now, if the game is not optimized, of course, it is gonna run much worse. And yes, there are way less games for Mac. Windows is the way to go for gaming. But taking a look at the GPU clock, the frequencies, both ran at about 1.3 gigahertz, which is interesting. But as far as the amount of power needed to get this performance, our MacBook only needed 43.3 watts to hit that performance, whereas the 3080 uses up to 106 watts to get that same performance. So that is basically literally double the wattage. Now, I was also curious about the graphics performance on battery when we're maxing out the GPU, just like when you're gaming this test. And when we did that, the Razer's 3080 dropped down to 780 megahertz, and then the wattage dropped from 106 down to 46. So pretty much matching what our M1 Max chip is. Yeah, so the M1 Max didn't change at all, got the same score, but the Razer went down from 129 FPS to 79.58, whereas the Max stayed the same at 121. So with pretty much the same power usage, the performance difference is pretty massive, with the MacBook being 58% faster. And now let's get into something more serious. We have Blender opened up right here, and we have a new sample project from Hishnash. He created this for us that is pretty intensive on memory. So we jumped up the different counts on here. Let's go ahead and render this first one. All right, we have our scores, and this task uses both the GPU and the CPU. And it looks like our MacBook was able to finish in 19.44 seconds compared to 30.24 with the Razer. That's a difference of about 55%. And now let's run Splashbox, which you can download on Blender's website yourself and test out your system. This one right here uses mostly CPU, and bam, we are finished. The Mac did finish first. It took 21.62 seconds compared to 27.09. It's a difference of 25%, so less than what we saw in Geekbench, but of course that tests a wide variety of tasks. So it looks like for Blender, for CPU tests, the performance isn't that huge of a difference. And now let's test Party Tug, which you can also download. This one is mostly GPU based. I have the shaders compiled ahead of time. It took quite a bit longer with the Razer to do so, and now we're gonna go ahead and render this. And wow, that was almost instant right there. Super quick using graphics, and this time the Razer one took 4.19 seconds compared to 6.37 seconds. So you gotta wait a couple extra seconds with the Mac. No excuses for the Mac. It definitely lost by about 50%. but we are still using OpenGL, I believe. Metal support is going to be coming out next year, which will speed it up. But for now, the 3080 definitely takes the win in graphics rendering. And now let's jump into photo editing with Lightroom. As far as the performance, when you're actually doing the editing, there's no difference. Both these are beasts of machines. The one difference you'll notice is just fan noise with the Razer constantly kicking up the fans when the Intel processor has its turbo boost kicking in. Now, one thing I do want to test before we export these 50 edited 42 megapixel RAW images is the enhanced, so Adobe Super Resolution. This is interesting. We have an estimate of 10 seconds for the MacBook and only 3 seconds for the Razer. So I wonder if it's using the CUDA in order to do that. Let's go ahead and hit enhance. Oh yeah, it definitely was using the graphics there, like 14 gigs of graphics memory. So the speed differences though, we have 11.6 seconds for the Razer and 18.2 for the MacBook. That is 56% faster, pretty much what we saw in Blender when we did that last export using graphics. And now let's export all 50 of those raw edited images to JPEG, and let's hit start. And the first thing I noticed is that these cores, when plugged in, hit 100 degrees Celsius, 3 of them, and the fans are just ramping up. We saw 85 watts on the CPU compared to the Mac, which only hits 30 watts on the CPU. And bam, the Razer thermal throttled down. The wattage is now 50. The clock speed's about 3.2, which is similar to the Mac, so it can't really sustain that heavy turbo for long. I mean, that is a lot of power, and of course a lot of fan noise to get rid of that heat. Whereas the Mac's fans at the end of this export just turned on, and they're literally running at idle. And that's a great thing with these 16-inch MacBook Pros. Bam, the Mac is done here. We're starting to get maybe a little bit more performance now as the fans creak up again. And bam, we are finished with the Razer. It took 1 minute and 54 seconds, which is an excellent time, at least when it's plugged in here. Previous Macs, they would take a lot longer with the Intel processors. They wouldn't ramp up as high on the fans or the wattage. So this thing is fast, but the new 16-inch with the M1 Max chip, the 10-core processor, we're looking at 1 minute and 21. Really, really fast exporting speeds. And of course, it doesn't slow down if it's on battery. And now we're running on battery power at 99%, but unplugged, and the Razer is silent. So if you want it to run really cool, really quiet, that helps a lot. And as you see, it's only running at 62, 63 degrees Celsius, so very cool. That's because it's only using about 20 watts of power and running the fastest at 1.6 gigahertz. Now it's running at like 1.3. It's definitely taking longer though. And that took 3 minutes and 24 seconds on battery power. And now let's get into video editing. I have DaVinci Resolve opened up on both, which is really well optimized for both systems, better than Premiere. Of course, we can't use Final Cut in this comparison. And here I have a standard project open. It is H.265. Why is that stuttering a little bit? All right, there you go, it's good. H.265, both these handle it without any issue. They both have really good decoders and encoders. Nvidia is actually killer for that. So as far as projects for most people, H.265 like this or H.264 with a couple LUTs applied, a little bit of correction, some film grain, both laptops will do a killer job. Now I'm gonna go ahead and export this project here, and then we'll get into some tougher tests. And bam, let's render this 5-minute project. Right out of the gate, both are flying. It looks like the Razer is going at about 65 frames per second, which is almost, I don't know, not triple, but a lot higher than the actual project. And on the MacBook, we're looking at 89, 90 FPS, right around there. Apple did update with dual encoders. In the past, this Razer smoked the i9 Intel 16-inch MacBook Pro, absolutely demolished it, exporting H.265, which is a bit faster than H.264. All right, we have our scores. The Razer was extremely fast, 1 minute and 48 seconds, but the MacBook did the task in 1 minute and 22 seconds, almost 4 times faster than real time, whereas the Razer was about 2.75 times faster than real time. Definitely incredible performance on both. Now, I don't want to do unplugged performance because we've done it too many times, but we've tested this in the past, and it is about 3 times slower than this result once you unplug it. It slows down quite a bit, but pretty crazy performance here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is stabilize a 20-second 4K clip. This is going to use 100% GPU power and help us compare the GPU capabilities in DaVinci Resolve. Both of these are flying. This is going to be a very close one. Okay. Wow. The Razer took just 10 seconds. I've never seen a laptop go that fast. Incredible. It's the first time I'm actually testing it after all these tests that we've done this last week. And the Mac with 32 cores, M1 Max chip, took 9 seconds. So that is what, 10% faster in DaVinci Resolve running Metal versus CUDA. That is crazy, crazy fast on both. And to push his GPUs even more, which I mean, they were maxed out anyways, but we are gonna do some noise reduction testing. I have Blackmagic raw footage, this is 4K, and then I have 3 frames of temporal noise reduction. I also have spatial noise reduction, same exact file, same settings on both, and this is gonna have to use the graphics. I'm in the color tab to see the accurate frames per second. Let's hit play. And look at that, guys. The Razer is giving us a solid 17 frames per second out of the 24 total, while the MacBook is only giving us 10 or 11 frames per second. Definitely worse performance for noise reduction in DaVinci Resolve. And continuing with Blackmagic Raw, this is a 6K project that is color graded, running on both. Of course, the MacBook doesn't have decoders for this kind of footage. I don't think the Razer does either. They're just accelerated with the graphics. Both are playing back perfectly smoothly, handling this without an issue. I'd like to export this 5-minute project to ProRes, but I can't, of course, with Windows. So let's go ahead and export to H.264. All right, guys, I was not expecting this. I thought that the MacBook would slow down because it has less graphics power, and then the RTX laptop would speed up. But here, it is actually going faster than with H.265, even though it doesn't have decoders for Blackmagic Raw. It was going at like 96 frames per second compared to 55 for the Razer. And the fans didn't even turn on for the 5-minute export on the MacBook compared to full speed pretty much the whole time with the Razer. That is crazy. And as far as the results, the Razer was slower this time than with H.264, 2 minutes and 11 seconds, meaning it was limited by the graphics performance, but the MacBook was faster, 1 minute and 15 seconds, which means that maybe before is limited by decoders since Blackmagic Raw does not use those. That is insane. Usually we do less graphics testing and video editing than this, but I keep trying to throw more workloads on it to give Razer something to work with for that higher power graphics card. So what else can we throw at it? I can't do Canon R5 footage because this thing runs it slow. It can't decode that well, so the Mac would win there. I probably can't do ProRes stuff because of the encoding, and plus the MacBook has dedicated decoders as well for it, so it would make it much faster. I guess let's maybe throw some red footage on there. That's gonna have to use all graphics. Maybe it'll just go all the way to 8K. All right, this is an 8K project in an 8K timeline with good debayering and with color grading. And it looks like in the color tab, because it doesn't play back perfectly, we're getting about 15 frames per second on the Razer, 15, sometimes 16, and then we're getting 19 and 20 frames per second on the MacBook. Okay, this is just interesting. I was not expecting that either. And the Mac, it's silent. And the Razer, well, you guys might be able to hear that for yourselves. Oh my goodness, this is even worse when we're exporting this. It looks like the difference is the same or maybe even a little bit greater with the MacBook exporting at 18.5 frames per second, 19.5 compared to 14.5 here with the Razer. And we're not limited by our encoders. We're not limited by, video memory. This thing has 16 gigabytes of video memory here. Of course, the Mac, this thing has 32, but it has to share it with the CPU and the GPU. It's mostly just the raw graphics performance, and we are plugged in, batteries maxed out, and it's handling the red footage better on the Mac as well. All right, guys, the export is done, and this was not a 5-minute project. It was only a 1 minute 8K project to H.265, so no limitations on encoders on either system, just raw graphics here. And the Razer took 1 minute and 41 seconds, which is still good, but the MacBook took 1 minute and 19 seconds. So there you go. And just to be honest with you guys maybe heard my tone of my voice change, the tone of it. I just was not expecting these results. Going into this, I mean, I knew the battery life's gonna be way better. We weren't even able to test it because I also knew that the performance of these RTX cards drop dramatically when you're unplugging. Now, I didn't expect the CPU to drop as dramatically as it did. You know, speakers, screen, all of that stuff. We've tested these screens before. But man, at least in the video editing with the RTX graphics card, and especially stuff that's not using the decoders like Black Magic Raw and the Red, I thought it was gonna just absolutely smoke this 32 core MacBook. You know, the price difference is almost the same, $100 more for the Mac. You get the much nicer display, crazy much better battery life. And all these tests would be the same on battery, better speakers, and you guys saw that performance as well. Now the Razer, yes, for gaming, even though if both are optimized, it's similar. Of course, this is what you want for Windows games. So much more games, everything runs without any issues. As long as you're plugged in, no problems. And we did see in Blender some faster speeds. And then as far as noise reduction in real time, we had 17 FPS compared to 11. But overall, I just was not expecting the MacBook to hold up so well compared to this RTX 3080. But you guys let me know your comments, your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them. If you guys aren't yet subscribed and you want to see us compare this MacBook to the new Alder Lake laptops, once those come out, click that circle above to subscribe. You guys can help us reach 1 million subscribers. Check out our merch down below. Check out one of those great videos right over there. This has been Max, and I will see you in the next video.